Alright, welcome back. You are listening to the Sports Revolt. I'm Ty Quass. Remy Smith along with me for this premiere, hopefully iHeart episode. And we talked about baseball in the last half-hour segment. Of course, technically these are going to be uploaded separately. But we want to talk a little bit about fantasy football. I know, this is a Detroit-themed show. But hey, Calvin Johnson's a first-round pick, potentially. So, there, your local angle, Detroit. Now, of course, Remy and I participate in a league together. Yes, we don't just do business together. We also, a little bit of pleasure, with our pleasure being the Fantasy Football League. Neither of us won championships last year, but we both made the playoffs. So I think we know what we're talking about.
It was this close, man.
I was closer.
I had my kryptonite last year. One team beat me 3 times. Twice in the regular season, once in the first week of the playoffs. And in that first week of the playoffs, I was the second highest point total across the entire league. The only team that could have beat me was him. And he beat me because I was playing him. So, other than that, I would have won the... And then my points for the rest of the way out, I would have won the championship. But I digress, that was last year. Forget about it.
Well, it's okay, because, I was 2-0 against the league champion in head-to-head matchups.
Not too shabby.
He had like 3 losses the entire season, and I gave him 2 of those. Wow. I had a first-round bye, but then I couldn't win when I made the playoffs because, Ray Rice just went off.
Yeah.
That was on Gary's team. So
it's all luck and timing in fantasy football.
How many fantasy leagues have you participated in your lifetime?
This year will be my 4th.
This will be your 4th?
Yep.
This will be my 3rd. Now, I don't know about you, but in every league I've participated in, the team that had Adrian Peterson won the championship.
Wow, that's some good news.
Not necessarily.
For whoever has Adrian
Whoever
Peterson,
wins a lot.
I guess.
Well, he wasn't the first pick in the first league, but this was the first year. Okay, it was one of my college roommates because when I went to Central, we did a fantasy league. He had Adrian Peterson, got him as like 4th or 5th overall. He was a lower seed, but he had a hot streak at the end of the season, squeaked in the playoffs, and took care of business.
Here's the thing I know about fantasy football. It may be that whoever had Adrian Peterson on their team won the championship in every league that you played in, but fantasy football is not a one-man team.
That's
true.
You
can't just build your team around one guy. You got to have all the right components.
I can't help but originally I didn't want the first overall pick, but if I get the first overall pick, I just may have to pick Adrian Peterson because it sounds like a good omen.
Yeah. It would not be a bad first overall pick.
He's going first overall in just about every league.
Yeah, the guy went off last year. He's expected to do the same this year. I hate the Minnesota Vikings, and so I never want to take anybody from their team.
So if you get the first overall pick, if you get anyone, this isn't giving away a strategy necessarily. Because if you have the first overall pick, who do you get?
Oh man, that's a good question.
If you're not going to pick Adrian Peterson, he's the obvious.
Hey, him or Arian Foster.
Arian Foster is second on the board.
He
went first in our league last year.
But there's about 7 or 8 running backs that you could take, and all of them are going to be worth that number 1 pick.
Adrian Peterson didn't get drafted until the end of the 2nd round in our league last year or something. Because remember, Linderick, our league champion, took Arian Foster with his first pick, but he got Adrian Peterson later. I don't think he picked him up in a trade.
Well, remember, Peterson last year was coming off an injury.
Yep.
And so he was not as high on all of the
come to think of it, I think Peterson was out the year before when my league partner won the championship. Peterson was out with an injury. It was Gronkowski being hot that really helped him win the championship. And, of course, I had Gronkowski on my team last year, and he went down with an injury at the end. And that kind of cost me my season just a little bit. So,
yeah, what are you gonna do? If I get the first pick, I'm going. Who am I gonna go? Andrew Luck. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, okay. He'll be like the 15th quarterback to go.
Yeah, I'm not picking Luck.
There's so many talented quarterbacks in the league right now. That's why I think a 2-quarterback league could be a lot of fun. Because think about it, if we're in a 10-team league, that's 20 of the 32 starting quarterbacks getting points every week.
Right.
So But I'll admit, part of the reason I want to do 2 quarterbacks is I just have this vision of getting Tom Brady and Colin Kaepernick on my team and just letting them both dominate.
Tom Brady's not going to have as good a year.
I know. I'm not going to pick him in the first round. Like last year, I picked him with the 2nd overall pick.
Sure, and last year that was a good move.
He's projected to go like 46 this year.
Yeah.
But I still want him. I'm not going to lie a little bit. I still have faith that Gronkowski...
Still have a man crush on him, eh, Ty?
Yeah. Gronkowski's going to come back sometime in the middle of the year, and if I can just get a good enough team to, tread water... Well, I don't want to tread water. I want to be good with or without Gronkowski, but if I can get Gronkowski in a later round, pair him up with Jimmy Graham...
There's other good tight ends out there. The tight end is a tough one to pick, but there's a reason that you pick your tight end in the 7th or the 8th
You
round.
either get Jimmy Graham early or you tank the position to a later round.
Right, but, who's to say that Jimmy Graham doesn't, break his leg in the 3rd week and you're out, or maybe he's not as productive this year. It's a crapshoot with any player that you're picking.
Well, he's Drew Brees' future target.
What I've found, and my advice for fantasy football people out there is you can do a lot of damage in a 10-person league by working the waiver wire and getting lucky with that. Just the last 7 or 8 picks in the draft are meaningless because it's basically like the precursor to the waiver wire.
Yeah.
There's guys that I drafted in the first 3 or 4 rounds last year that I traded away or flat out dropped.
Yeah.
And then picked up somebody on the waiver wire that I had for the rest of the year and was awesome and a stud for me.
You just never know.
That's just the way fantasy football goes. I drafted Greg Jennings last year and then traded him by the 2nd week right before he got hurt and got somebody awesome for him.
The team that you traded Greg Jennings to was our worst team in our league. He had no clue.
He had no clue, but it was still the point of, at the time that I traded Jennings, he was not injured. I traded him on good faith. I just didn't like what I saw in the first week. Traded him, and then he got hurt. It was like, I just got lucky that way. I also happened to trade for Doug Martin right before he went off.
He's projected 3rd. He's considered a first rounder in this year's league.
That is not a bad first overall pick.
You might pick him.
I might pick Doug Martin. I had him on my team last year. Loved the guy.
Do you think there's sentiment? Is there any place for sentimental value in a fantasy league? Players that you've had before who did well for you that you might end up overvaluing.
There is, and there shouldn't be. Yes. I've had Lance Moore twice on 2 different fantasy teams.
Yeah.
I've had.
I've had Tom Brady both years that I played fantasy.
But the thing,
he was my first round pick both years.
The thing about
9th overall,
the thing
2nd
about
overall.
Lance Moore is a good wide receiver 3 option. He's a good option for wide receiver 3. He gets you 8-10 points often, so I stick by that. I probably won't take him again this year, but quarterbacks. I will never draft Peyton Manning again because he let me down horribly one year. And
what year did you draft him?
I'm bitter about that.
What year did you draft him?
Last year he was relevant with the Colts.
Okay.
So
what
three seasons.
What round did you use him on?
What did I use?
Was he your first round pick?
2nd, I think.
2nd, okay.
Yeah, something like that.
You want your 2nd round pick to be great.
I kept him all year long, and he won me a couple of games, but he let me down at the end of the season. It was just terrible. I'm not going to draft him again just because I'll never draft Phillip Rivers again. But then I don't think anybody will.
Well, Phillip Rivers could serve as a backup quarterback. He's not too bad.
When he puts it all together, he's fine, and it might be something to say for their getting rid of Norv Turner out there in San Diego. He might be better, but no, I had him one year, and he let me down, so I don't want to have him again. I was happy with my quarterback last year, Matty Ice, man. Matt Ryan down in Atlanta. It was a great pick for me. I took him in like the 6th round, and he just lit him up,
Now, scoring. As far as scoring goes, have you been in multiple kinds of scoring leagues? Last year's league that we were in was a PPR, but we had half a point per reception.
And I like that. I kind of dig the extra points.
That's what our league is doing this year. I don't like a full point per catch, though. I think that's overkill. I know that my friends in an ESPN league, and they do that. It seems like overkill to me, because if you have one catch and you lose a couple yards, it's just like, you don't deserve a whole point for that. Right? And they don't even do decimals in some of those leagues.
Yeah.
I like decimals.
The decimal point system is good,
It's the fairest
thing to do. Losing by a 1/10 of a point.
Now, Now, there's a lot of differences in drafting strategy depending on the kind of league you have, though, right?
Right.
Like, for example, with this year's league, I'm still trying to contemplate if I want to start 2 tight ends a week or just start 1 tight end a week and let, tight end be a flex if you have 2 good. I'm thinking 1 tight end maybe.
There's not enough there's not enough great tight ends in the league to make it worth doing 2 tight ends.
Yeah.
I think you go, if you want to do the 2 quarterbacks, then you do, what are you having, 3 wide receivers?
3 wide receivers, 3 running backs.
See, I think we're going overkill on everything. It's like,
well, last year we had 3 wide receivers and only 2 running backs, and that didn't make sense to me. Because running backs and wide receivers score about the same.
Right, but why are you adding another one instead of subtracting one? You're already adding another quarterback.
Higher scoring.
Well, right. So you're going to have...
more strategy. You have to draft well.
The winning team gets...
less of that stupid less waiver wire crap and more good drafting.
Right. So there you go. So you got 2 quarterbacks, 3 wide receivers, 3 running backs. Then you go 1
tight end, 1 flex, a defense, and a kicker.
Defense. Okay, that'll work.
I'm going to have to edit the scoring, though. I'm going to have to get rid of, because I've had 2 tight ends and I got rid of it, then I added it again. Yeah. I'll get rid of the second tight end.
Yeah,
and I don't want a second tight end. No, I just keep playing around with the scoring because we still don't have a closed league.
That's all right.
So advice to all you people out there, you commissioners, you got to be hard on your fellow players. So I'm about to send another message yelling at those 3, telling them sign up.
I've got a beef, and I want to bring this up. I did a mock draft for the first time.
I did a mock draft, too.
Yeah, I wanted to see what it was like to go on there and mock draft, and it was stupid.
It is stupid.
It was
It had a 14-team league, and they had, the minimum roster.
That's exactly what I had. It was a 14-team league, a minimum roster, and I didn't mind about that so much, but it was... people were taking the full time allotted to make their picks.
That's because... Well, that's because some people will sign up and then they'll have an issue or they'll leave partway through, and so then it becomes automated, and whenever it's automated, they take the full 2 minutes.
Oh, that's dumb. Well, it was a minute and a half, but it was annoying.
See, I was in a 2-minute one.
Yeah, it was annoying. And it was like, what is the point of this? Number 1, I'm not playing in a 14-team league, so it's dumb. Number 2... the whole point of when you're drafting is you have an idea when you come in of the team that you want, the players that you want. If those players don't fall to you, you take a look at the list that's right on the left-hand side of your computer. If you're doing it on, with a draft online, is what I'm assuming.
Yeah.
If you're doing an online draft with your buddies for your real league, you take a look at the best available players and how they're projected. And you grab from them, you throw them over into your queue, you're ready to go. It's like...
well, sometimes the Yahoo projections aren't right, so you want to go through and make your own pre-draft rankings to refer to. Like, I have my own list that I'm going to have for the draft, and that'll allow me to make my picks quickly.
I'm just saying, it's, it's such a guessing game. From one year to another, guys are not going to get the same amount of touchdowns. All the numbers and stats and things that you want out there, you've got an idea of who you want to go where, and it all depends on how they fall.
Yeah, but there are some keys to being a good fantasy player. I can't tell you how many times I've seen players who had decent teams who were too lazy to edit their lineup when a bye week occurred.
Yeah, that's just dumb.
Like, there was this one guy in our league. I don't have to name his name, but he never paid. And he had one of the most talented rosters, but he never changed during bye weeks, and it would cost him. Yeah. Like, he had Greg Little out there every week, and Greg Little would get hurt too, but he had Drew Brees, he had Jimmy Graham, he had Roddy White.
No, he did good in the draft.
That's a playoff team.
He did good in the draft, yeah.
He had a great draft, but he didn't keep track. His team name was Who Dat, named after the Saints. It was that team, if you recall. He had a very talented roster.
Yeah, but you got to play it right.
Yeah.
That definitely comes into it.
I mean, there were some people who made the playoffs that I don't think had very talented rosters, but they made the right moves. Yeah. Our championship runner-up, who beat me in the semifinals, Gary, I don't think he had a very good roster. I think he had one of the lamest rosters in the entire league, but the guy knew his matchups.
Yep.
And he ended up being a 3 seed as a result. My team wasn't even that great of a roster at times. I mean, once I had a couple players get hurt, I had to go to the waiver wire like crazy.
I made good trades. I picked up a lot of guys. Well, I picked up I picked up Doug Martin via trade, but I picked up Alfred Morris on the waiver wire early in the season. As soon as he scored a couple of touchdowns, I snapped him up, and I rode that horse all the way down. I play him almost every week.
So let's each give some just little tips for advice. If you can give fantasy players 3 tips for success, you give people the top 3, and then I can give my top 3.
Yeah.
It's a nice way.
Have a plan when you go into the draft.
And
so have a plan and stick to it, but you got to be able to work on the fly. So by a plan, I mean, you look at your roster spots that you have to fill, and you go, all right, here's the guys that I want. But if those guys don't fall to me, here's what I'm willing to accept, and then here's my third choice. Okay, bam, you're done.
Okay.
Make decisions on the fly, and go with your gut with the decision on the fly. And what I'm talking about is like once you've drafted. Once the season started, if a guy doesn't feel right to you, don't hesitate. Pull the trigger. Sell him.
Should people,
trade him.
When you say on the fly, should people, for example, if you originally want to get a running back in a certain round, or you got certain players you like, but you notice that in one round it is a certain position that is getting overwhelmingly drafted, do you feel the need to draft at that position, follow the trend, or can you go somewhere different and get someone better at another position and accept the fact that you're not going to be as good at running back?
Yeah, I tried to do that. Last year.
That's usually what I do.
There was a position that I didn't fill, and so I drafted extra in another position so that I'd be loaded and could try and trade.
Yep.
And I ended up making some trades, and I ended up making some.
I didn't get a running back until the 4th round last year, and my first year doing fantasy, I didn't get a running back until the 3rd round, and it was Peyton Hillis after having a good year with the Cleveland Browns. So I've had problems at running back.
Yeah, well, this year, the consensus is to go running back early and often, and then worry about your wide receivers and your quarterbacks afterwards.
That's what I noticed in my mock draft, but I ended up getting Jimmy Graham with the 2nd pick, and I realized that's stupid.
Yeah, you got to look at how many points he's going to get you compared to.
I was thinking compared to other tight ends. See, I was comparing it to other tight ends. I wanted to have the competitive advantage of tight end.
Jimmy Graham is still going to be there in the 3rd round, maybe in the 4th round.
He went in the 2nd round in our league last year. Houdat picked him in the 2nd round.
All right, so
right after getting Drew Brees in the first.
He's another wide receiver. So if you'd take a wide receiver in the 2nd round, why wouldn't you take that?
Yeah,
conceivably.
Okay, well, yeah. Fair enough.
With Jimmy Graham, he acts like a wide receiver. Same thing with Gronk last year.
Yeah,
they act like a
I
wide
picked
receiver.
Gronk in the 2nd round last year. I went Patriots in my first 3 rounds. I went Brady, Gronk, Welker.
I waited until the 8th round and got Tony Gonzalez, and he was awesome.
Yeah, that's true.
He was the 2nd or 3rd.
Do you think Tony Gonzalez, though, is bound to crash pretty soon, though, considering how old he is, that he's going to get substantially worse this year?
No, because he's one of those players that he's not going to slow down much more than he already has. Okay, he's still going to run the same routes for you. The reason he's so good is he's a big target. He's got great hands. He's hard to tackle, and those things don't change.
So your tip number 1, essentially. So you say don't overvalue a player's position, but you were saying go into the draft with a concrete plan.
Yeah, I mean you want to know basically what you want to do.
I've never really done that too well. I always know who I want to get first.
Sure.
Well, I didn't actually know. My first time I was in a fantasy league. Because Phillip Rivers, going into 2011, was considered the best fantasy quarterback.
Yep.
But at the last minute, I said to myself, no, I want Brady. Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers had already gotten drafted. Yep. I'll never draft Aaron Rodgers. That's my whole hating of the Packers thing. I don't mind drafting a Viking, but Packers, no.
And I don't think Rodgers is going to be a fantasy stud this year.
He lost his Brian Beluga, the blind side.
That's what I'm saying. It's hard to throw downfield when you're on your ass.
I hope someone picks him early, though, in the 1st round. One of our league partners will pick Aaron Rodgers within the first 2 rounds, right? He's going to get picked early.
Fine. Good luck with that.
Yeah, I know, right? It's funny, because remember, our league champion last year, Linderick, he wanted to get Aaron Rodgers with the 1st pick. Yeah. But he missed the 1st pick. He wasn't signed in time, and they ended up with Arian Foster from the auto draft.
He had to settle for Arian Foster.
I know, and that worked out so great for him. He ended up winning the damn league.
Yeah, that happened.
He didn't even get the 1st rounder he wanted. So maybe I should just... Well, no, I have my pre-draft rankings. I got to change that, because I have Graham, in my top 3. I have him at 2 after Adrian Peterson, so I got to change that. But anyway, so that's your tip number 1. That took us a while. Tip number 2.
work the waiver wire. Like if a guy goes off and scores a touchdown, go ahead and pick him up. As long as do we have unlimited pickups? If there's only a limited number of transactions that you can make on the waiver wire, then you have to be very careful with it. But if it's unlimited, go pick guys up, and then you can drop them later if they suck.
So always pay attention to that. The only thing that kind of sucks about the waiver wire, but I guess they do that to make this fair. I contemplated changing it, but I didn't. Because last year's waiver wire was fair, right? Everyone takes turns being, first chance to get who they want. Right. Because you can't just have one person constantly. I did shorten the waiver wire period from 48 hours to 24, though. Really, because I want results quickly. I don't want to have to wait 2 days to figure out whether or not I'm going to have that for my lineup, because I'm the kind of guy who likes to set my lineup on Tuesday.
Yeah, but then tweak throughout the week, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. But I want to make sure that no one on a bye week is still in my lineup.
That's smart.
That goes down to my advice later. But anyway, that was your second one. You said waiver wire. Okay, number 3.
You had all week to see that the guy was on a bye. You really...
Exactly.
You didn't go on there once and see it?
Yeah. But anyway, you're number 3.
And then number 3 is... Don't forget that it is just a stupid game, and it's supposed to be fun, and,
says King of Smack Talk.
All your buddies... Well, that to me is what the fun part is.
It is
It's
fun.
like, talk a little smack, have some fun with your buddies, and realize that it's like, nobody's a genius if they win at all, and nobody sucks if they don't. Now, if you wait all week and you play a bunch of guys that are hurt or on a bye, then yeah, you do suck.
Yeah.
But if you make
there's a lot of skill
you make the
involved.
best choices, and some of it's luck. Sometimes like, oh, this guy's really good. He's got a great matchup, but I'm going to go with this guy, and that guy happens to go off. You look like a genius. Did you do something really smart? No, you went with your gut and you got lucky. So,
yeah. All right. I'm not going to give the same tips as you because that would be no fun.
Right.
3 more for success. Number 1, pay attention. Week by week, people will have bye players. Players will have bye weeks. When you go into a draft, do not stack up at one position with multiple players who have the same bye week, because you don't want to be that guy who has to constantly release players and sign new people on a bye week. Have people ready for each week. Don't be that person who has to cut your kicker when his bye week and then have to go get someone worse, only to find that someone else with an empty roster spot just went and got Sebastian Janikowski because you didn't have 2 kickers on your team.
There's so many kickers. There's so many good kickers in the league. And from week to week,
there are those 3 or 4 who are way better.
There are.
Power. Extra points for power.
Absolutely. And Janikowski kicks more 50 and 60-yard field goals than anybody else.
That was my kicker last year.
So he's a good one to have. But I'm telling you that from a week-to-week basis, your kicker can get you between 7 and 10 points, and there's tons of them out there on the waiver wire all the time. So don't worry about the kickers.
So we disagree a little bit there. My point is, it sucks when you have to just release people because you didn't think ahead early. Same thing with the defense. If you draft 2... I like to have 2 defenses. That way, the team that faces the weaker offense gets the start.
Yeah, see, I'm a rotating kickers and rotating defense kind of guy. If I will play a different defense every single week of the year if I can. Every single week.
So you'll just go... But that the best defenses get drafted.
Exactly.
You don't want that best defense?
No, don't care. Because
I would care if I were you. There's a lot of bonuses to be had for good defenses.
Because one week you pick up the San Diego Chargers, who are a terrible defense on paper, but they end up getting you 20 points.
There are a lot more.
And then there's another week when you pick up the Arizona Cardinals, and lo and
behold, it's a crapshoot.
Oh my gosh! Lo and behold, they go off and they get 6 touchdowns.
Or you could pick them up and they end up with -5. Or what if you pick up the team that had a great week the week before and then they are bad the next week? So that's why you want to draft a good defense.
Defenses are too tough to tell which one's going to be good.
But it depends.
Which one's going to get you the most points is what I mean.
Well, there's a lot of scoring for defense, a lot of opportunities for points. Like, a 4th down stop can be worth a point. Remember, last year's defense in our league, I made some changes. Because last year, the only defenses that got rewarded were the ones that forced turnovers. The ones that held teams a little yardage and just got the job done, like Pittsburgh, didn't score enough. Yep. So I made it more balanced.
That's good.
You agree with that?
I think, that's the thing. Is like, if it's a tough, strong defense that wins games, holds teams to low scoring, holds them to low yards, you should get rewarded for that. It is.
Yeah, I did. I added yardage bonuses.
I also like the yardage bonuses.
I don't have yardage penalties, though, because ultimately it doesn't matter how many yards you give up if the team doesn't score. So there's still penalties for too much scoring.
I also noticed that you added some points for the return game.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. I'm not sure about that.
I kind of like that one because, you got Darren Sproles on your team. And he gets you, he had a game last year that was like 275 yards or something like that.
Darren Sproles is really valued in this year's league.
Exactly. He's a good running back and a good return man. And I think if he's on your team and you're playing him as a running back, you should get credit if he's out there risking his life and limb for a return guy too. Why not?
So number one, that was my tip number one. Tip number two. This has to do with opponents in your league. Remember, everyone has their weaknesses. Everyone has their soft spots. Find the homers in your league, get the players they want, and make them pay. I had a person last year who was begging for Titus Young.
Begging for Titus Young?
Yeah, he wanted Titus Young so badly from me. Huh. Yes. The guy was in the bottom of the standings at the end of the year, but he wanted Titus Young. I ended up getting Brian Hartline from him. And Hartline became a solid number 3 for me, who got yardage like crazy. Yeah. And the guy's only valued to go like 143rd in this year's draft.
Look for the homers.
But he was so valued. Yeah, look for those homers. And don't let your draft strategy change too much based on what they want to do. Have your own plan. Don't listen to opinions of other fantasy players in your own league because they're a conflict of interest. Heck, don't even take your friends' advice, the ones who think differently from you. I live with my best friend who plays fantasy leagues. He even said that if we have an odd number of players in our league that he could fulfill the final gap. I'm giving our players every chance they get to join, but ultimately I have an alternate lined up if one person doesn't sign up. But he'll always give me this advice. I mean, because he has a very different style. He'll go into every week, and he'll ask me for my opinions, too, which is odd, because even though he asks me for my opinion, he's always critiquing what I do as well, yet he seems to value my opinion so much, too. It's weird, but anyway, he always overthinks the matchups like crazy. He'll have 2 defenses, just like I do, and he'll change it all the time, and there'll be those times where he gets it right and those times where he doesn't. He made the playoffs last year just like I did, but his style was so different. He would always criticize I'm the kind of person who likes to put faith in the players I draft. He's way quicker on giving up on people. Like, I had Michael Turner on my team last year, and there'd be all these times like, oh, you just got to bench him, get rid of him for anybody. Same thing with Steven Jackson. Well, those are my top 2 running backs. Every once in a while, if Turner finds the end zone, they get him at the goal line. He had the power. That's 6 points right there. And he would have those weeks where he'd be good. My team was still good. So don't necessarily listen to other people's opinions too much because then you find yourself second-guessing yourself. Yeah, it's all psychological.
What works for one may not work for the other. Sometimes it's best to ride a hot defense for a while until they let you down. Other times, it's like, oh, maybe that was just last week.
It's all about the hot streaks.
Maybe that one was a little bump in the road, and maybe he'll be back next week and ready to go. But, yeah, it's tough. I had a season where I couldn't do anything right. Every guy that I had that was a stud was sitting on my bench. And every guy that was, supposed to be awesome was on my team and underperformed. And I won like 2 or 3 games the whole season. It was terrible. It's like, and it was just like that. It was comical. Wow. Any move that I made was the wrong move.
Any
move I made. I drafted a decent team. They were all big name players. They were all guys that should have performed well, but I always had them riding the bench when they did good.
I have yet to miss the playoffs in fantasy. However, I have yet to win a playoff game.
So that's another one.
Like, I remember coming so close my first year, and the only reason... Okay, Ahmad Bradshaw was suspended for the first half of a game for some violation of team rules. My opponent had Ahmad Bradshaw. I thought to myself, okay, if they can just hold off Bradshaw, I could have won. But then Bradshaw comes back in, and he wins. Plus, one of my players who I was expecting to play was like a last-minute scratch, and that ended up costing me. I don't remember who it was exactly, but I had some... It might have been Peyton Hillis. Guy was my Achilles heel that year. I mean, Tom Brady, Larry Fitzgerald, and Peyton Hillis were my first 3 picks a couple years ago. And I started the season like 3-0, 4-0, but I ended up going like 6-7 and just barely making the playoffs. Yeah. And it was bad.
It's tough.
But, so as far as number 3 goes is, though, don't be afraid to make changes when you need to. You got to be ready to, move on the fly. Not just with the waiver wire. I mean, there are situations where someone's a free agent because they haven't been waived. You don't just look at the waiver wire. Look at those guys who are constantly getting picked up in other leagues, but no one's paying attention to in this one.
Correct.
Like, I had Joik Bell on my team last year, but I was stupid, and I was too stupid to ever really give him the start. I ended up with, around the end of my season, I had, after Willis McGahee hurt himself, I had Noshawn Moreno, Joik Bell, Mikael LaShore, Jaquez Rogers, and Michael Turner. So here's some advice. Don't have multiple running backs on the same team, because then you always find yourself conflicted of who to go with, and you always end up picking the wrong guy.
Yeah.
So it's a little different at wide receiver, maybe, just a little bit, because, you've got the depth charts. Although I will say, if you have the Denver Broncos, between Decker, Welker, and Thomas,
who's going to get the targets?
I like the order of the board. I mean, Thomas and Decker, I think, are going to be the top 2. Part of the reason Welker did so well in New England was he formed that chemistry with Tom Brady, and Tom Brady is the kind of guy who, when you never know who his top receiver is going to be.
True. But Peyton Manning's very similar.
But he's got that chemistry with Thomas and Decker. He spreads the ball. Yeah. Peyton Manning spreads the ball more than Brady does. Well, Brady actually spreads the ball quite a bit too.
They didn't sign Wes Welker to a big fat contract out in Denver.
Gave him 2 years. Yeah, they gave him like 2 years and $6 million.
They're going to give him the ball. He'll see the ball. You'll see.
Yeah, I believe it.
He's still Westway.
I wouldn't draft all 3 Denver receivers though. That's my point.
Yeah.
Because they're not all going to put up points in the same week.
But which one?
And you'll end up conflicted. You'll never know. People will overthink the matchups, though. Like that one person who always tries to give me advice. He's always overthinking his matchups before every week. And I'm just all like, dude, this receiver is a better player than the other receiver. Sure, this guy's playing a tougher corner. Go with the best players. So that's actually my final tip. Start your best players when they're available. Don't overthink the matchups because Calvin Johnson, it doesn't matter who's covering him. Calvin Johnson's going to dominate most of the time.
And only get 5
Don't overthink the matchups. Matchups are something, but they're not everything. Some people, some fantasy experts, some fantasy players make up matchups to be everything. They're not. They might be the 5th most important thing. My tips are more important than matchups. You didn't even mention matchups for your tips. How much stock do you put on matchups?
I look at it a little bit, but mostly I look at it for like team defense.
Yeah, that's about it for me.
Like who are they playing? Oh, they should be able to cream these guys.
Like there was one guy in our league last year. He had Tony. We only had one quarterback starting last year, but he had Tony Romo and he had Eli Manning. Yeah. He was always starting the wrong quarterback.
And I don't like either of those.
He just barely made the playoffs. But he was always starting the wrong quarterbacks, and it was costing him. It cost him against me 1 week.
I don't like those 2 guys for just that reason. It's 2 guys who
similar.
Are too inconsistent. You want a guy for quarterback that's going to...
You know what they're going to do. Is start him every week.
Right. He's going to get you like 17, 18, 20 points a game, but it's going to be consistent every single game. That's the best way to do it. Unless you got Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees when they were going off and getting like 30 points a game. 30 points.
Yeah. And then you can put someone like Eli on your bench and just start him that 1 week when Drew's on the bye week.
Exactly.
So those are our thoughts regarding fantasy football. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Fantasy football's coming up. Your drafts are coming up. You can go to the mock drafts. You can join leagues, put down some money.
I'm not doing another mock draft. That was stupid.
It was pretty stupid. And I did a bad job, too. And now I'm all afraid that I'm going to suck it up in our next draft. But I'm a good drafter. I remember people complimenting my drafting ability last year. I got Willis McGahee late. He was my best running back until he got hurt. And then I picked up Noshawn Moreno, his replacement, after McGahee went down because I figured, well, naturally, Moreno's going to get some touches. And he did.
I drafted Megatron. I think I was like the 8th pick or the 7th pick, and I picked up Megatron, and then I ended up trading him halfway through the year. So traded Megatron.
That's crazy. You got so many players though, but you had depth. Depth is more important.
I did. I had other wide receivers.
You traded Megatron to the same homer who begged for Titus Young.
Exactly.
After Titus Young failed him. Do you think he's going to be the same way in this year's league?
He's going to draft all Lions.
I mean, I want some Lions. I'm not going to lie, but I'm not going to overvalue it.
Good offense.
I want to get Reggie Bush if I can get him. I
That's
mean, the
one.
PPR, Reggie Bush. I will not draft Pettigrew. I won't touch him with the 10-foot pole.
You don't think he's finally over his dropping habits?
He lost 5 fumbles last year.
One of them took it right out of his hand.
I can't stand him. I want Scheffler to be our number 1 tight end. I like Scheffler because that guy's tough.
I want Pettigrew to have better hands because he's a beast. He's bigger than Megatron. He's not as fast, but he's a huge target. He could be the best tight end the NFL has ever seen. But he drops too many easy ones.
He's never going to be anything. Some ways. The guy's going to suck it up again this year. Mark my words. I'm not drafting him. He is on my no-go part of the list.
I think he'll be better. I had him his first year, and he was pretty good for me. He had a decent first year. But
he gives me headaches when I watch the Lions. It drives me nuts.
What was funny is when I drafted him, he was on my fantasy team, and I also had season tickets to the Lions. So every time I'd go to the Lions game, anytime anybody caught the ball, I was like, oh, it's Pettigrew, 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 oh, Pettigrew, Pettigrew, Pettigrew. And I'd say it over and over again. My buddies got annoyed with me, and so, of course, I did it more and more and more.
Well, yeah, naturally.
Like, oh, this bothers you? Let me do it again.
But yeah, so I hope that if you were a little lost about what to do this fantasy football season, you learned a little bit, because we talked about it for 35 damn minutes. I mean, we're not fantasy football experts. We didn't get a degree in fantasology or anything.
Neither one of us have ever won the championship yet. Although we've only played for a few years.
We're playoff teams, though.
Playoff teams count for something?
I'm going to win the championship this year in somewhere. I mean, I named my team after the team that I'm going after. Well, yeah, I named my team. Well, I named my team Hijacking the Bus because our defending league champions team name is the Bus Drivers. I don't know. I don't get the reference, but whatever. He won the championship last year, riding on 2 of the best running backs in the league.
That's all right. I'm the Dalai Lamas.
He made no moves.
This year I'm the Dalai Lamas because if I lose, it doesn't matter.
You're gonna be out $20.
Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. I just like to think
stakes are doubled this year.
Of the Dalai Lama, whenever something doesn't go his way, he just kind of shrugs his shoulders and smiles, and that's the way I like to look at fantasy football. If it doesn't work out for you, shrug your shoulders and smile.
It almost ruined my Christmas getting eliminated. I think I take fantasy football more seriously than you. Yeah. A lot more, probably. Remember, I was yelling at... Well, I shouldn't say yelling, but I was pointing fingers when our league champion was getting his money. Remember, I was talking shit. I mean, Chris gave him the money at our graduation ceremony, and we were all kind of huddled up in a circle, and I was just pointing at him all like, you just wait till next year. And everyone was like, oh my god, Ty is really intense about this.
Pull out a knife and shank him.
Yeah. Well, I had the second best record in the league. I had a first-round bye. My team was the highest scoring team the week that I had the bye, so we both had some bad luck.
Got some bad luck.
Although, really, because the week that they didn't need to perform...
They went off.
Yeah.
Of course.
So the same thing happened to you. We had the same fate, kind of. I mean, yours is a little worse when I think about it, because had my team played that week, I would have beaten anybody.
Right.
So, but that concludes this edition of the Sports Revolt. Hopefully iHeart will approve us. I mean, because I didn't play any music, I didn't play any sound bites that I don't have authorized. It's just us talking.
We're authorized, baby. We're ready. Bring it. Put us on.
Those of you who like what I do here, you can also check out my other show, Captain Controversy and the Revolution, my non-sports show that I'm not trying to get iHeart licensed, where I act weird and play weird music by the Westboro Baptist Church for people's amusement. Stuff like that. So, but although we are done for tonight, let me assure you have not heard the last of us. Good night.